Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
I didn't cry. I just deleted the email, ordered stuffing from Whole Foods, and told myself it wasn't personal, even though it 100% was. The subject line read, Thanksgiving headcount update, which already felt like corporate passive aggression disguised as family communication. My brother's wife, Karen, never called or texted. She only ever emailed like I was a client she wanted to ghost gently. The body of the email was worse than the title, Hey Claire. Hope you're well. We've had to make a tough call this year. We're keeping Thanksgiving small and intimate, just people with more structured lives and real careers. It's nothing personal. We love you. Followed by 3 exclamation points that felt like a slap in the face after a condescending pat on the head. I stared at the screen for a long second, letting the heat rise up my neck, that familiar blend of humiliation and anger that comes when someone doesn't even respect you enough to insult you to your face. I replied with one word, cool. Then I closed the laptop and sat there in silence, listening to the sound of the neighbor's dog barking next door like it was barking on my behalf. I opened the fridge, grabbed a sad bottle of Chardonnay I'd been saving for absolutely nothing in particular, and took a long sip straight from the neck. It's weird what words stick with you. Real careers echoed louder than it should have. I've been designing software interfaces and back-end systems for over a decade. I've worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies and have coded features you've probably used today without even knowing it. But because I don't clock in at a place with a name stitched on my shirt or have a plastic ID badge that opens a glass door, I've always been labeled the between jobs one, the still figuring it out sibling. The Claire's always been creative niece. Every Thanksgiving, I get seated next to grandma or the kids. Every time I try to talk about my projects, someone cuts in with a story about someone else's engagement or promotion or kidney stone. I ordered stuffing, cranberry sauce, and an overpriced pecan pie from the Whole Foods app and scheduled it for delivery. It wasn't much, but it was something. At least I'd still eat. I'd light a candle, put on jazz, and pretend I was one of those people who enjoy solitude. Like the ones you see in coffee commercials. Except they probably weren't just uninvited by their own family because their job title wasn't impressive enough for the dinner table. I sat on the floor of my living room, legs stretched out under my coffee table, half-eaten dinner in front of me, pie still untouched. The jazz playlist had moved from Miles Davis to some obscure Scandinavian saxophone quartet I couldn't pronounce, but it didn't matter. I wasn't really listening anymore. I was stuck, reliving every moment I ever let myself feel small around my brother and his perfect little suburban life. Eric had always been the golden child, got into Stanford, became a dentist, married a former cheerleader turned real estate agent, bought a 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage, 2 kids, 2 Labradors, the whole symmetrical picture. He had the kind of life you see on insurance commercials. And he weaponized it in the most subtle ways, making me feel like my freelance tech gigs were cute but not serious. Like I was playing with HTML while the rest of them were building real futures. I remembered the Christmas after I lost a big client, a huge deal that fell through at the last second. We were at Mom's house, eating dry turkey, and I made a joke about needing to pivot. Eric laughed and said, well, that's the danger when your job is just a hobby with a laptop. Everyone else chuckled along, including Mom, who quickly changed the subject and passed me the peas like that made it better. But tonight felt different. Not just because I was alone, but because I wasn't mad. I wasn't surprised. I was tired. Tired of pretending that their approval was some kind of prize. Tired of acting like I owed them an explanation for not living my life inside a cubicle with a nameplate. I checked my phone. No new texts. No missed calls. Not even from Mom. The group chat that had been buzzing all week with photos of pumpkin pies and folded napkins was completely silent on my end. Not even a pity invite. Not even a you sure you don't want to swing by for dessert? And yet, I still stared at the screen like it owed me something. Like it would suddenly flash and redeem the entire day. And then it did. Buzz. A new email. Subject line, "We're on. Tonight." It was from Victor Hale. Victor had been my white whale, an investor I'd met through a random mutual contact who had shown quiet interest in my latest project. A behavioral prediction engine using AI that could identify emotional stress patterns in early-stage Alzheimer's patients. I'd been working on it with Jesse, a brilliant ex-Google engineer who, unlike my family, actually believed in me. We'd gone through a brutal year of pitching, refining, bootstrapping, and sleepless nights. And now, we're on. Tonight. That meant only one thing. Something big was coming. Something very, very big. And the best part? My name was going to be right at the center of it. I didn't always live like this, burning coffee shop Wi-Fi in exchange for hours of work I wouldn't invoice until the end of the month. Sometimes not at all if a client ghosted me before payday. There were mornings I took video calls from the floor of my apartment bathroom, just so my cluttered studio backdrop wouldn't embarrass me in front of venture capitalists wearing Patagonia vests. For over a year, I lived off of granola bars, cheap instant noodles, and that very specific kind of hunger that lives in your chest and not your stomach, the kind of hunger that whispers you're not there yet, but you might be close. Jesse and I started building the prototype on a napkin, no exaggeration, at a bar in Capitol Hill while everyone else was talking about NFT rug pulls and metaverse real estate. She was ex-Google, one of those rare souls who had the brains of a machine and the heart of a nurse, and she had watched her mother slip into early-onset Alzheimer's with the kind of horror that burns itself into your blood. She wanted to build something that could read early emotional markers, subtle, microscopic shifts in voice, typing cadence, eye movement, that might catch cognitive degeneration before the damage settled in for good. I had the machine learning chops and the back-end architecture. She had the vision and enough rage to fuel a startup through hell. Together, we built Vigilance, an AI tool that didn't just diagnose, but predicted, one that could alert doctors and family members weeks before the signs became visible. We pitched to everyone who would listen. Some smiled politely and walked away. Others said the usual, "We love the mission, but we're not funding healthcare AI this quarter." A few got close. And 3 major health tech firms flirted with us for months, stringing us along like prom night hopefuls before eventually backing out because the liability risk was just too complex. But one company didn't walk away, Novacor. The old Titan. The one nobody thought would pay attention to 2 underdogs without Stanford MBAs or TED Talks. And yet, here we were. In less than 12 hours, we would finalize a deal that would net our company nearly $1,500 million. We had worked out most of the terms the night before, but Victor wanted one more Zoom session to lock in the details and get final sign-off. So I brushed my hair, put on a clean button-down shirt, and lit a candle in the corner of the room because some part of me still wanted to feel like I had control over something. Even if it was just the smell of orange and clove in a studio apartment that still didn't have a real kitchen table. I stared at the screen as Victor's face loaded in, that sharp grin of his just slightly off-center, always looking like he was a half step ahead of the conversation. He didn't waste time. "Claire," he said, "the lawyers are ready." Novacor's board approved everything as is. No last-minute tweaks. I nodded, heart thumping like I was being proposed to by the universe. "We're scheduling the embargo to lift 30 minutes after your signature hits the dock," he added. "You good?" I smiled and said yes, but what I really meant was, I was ready to burn everything I used to be afraid of. As I clicked through the agreement, I could hear a voice message from earlier replaying in my mind. My mom, trying her best to smooth things over like she always did. "Honey, just understand where your brother is coming from," she had said, like Eric was the misunderstood protagonist in some Hallmark movie. "He just wants to be around people who reflect the family name better." She meant well, of course. She always did. But it was a special kind of gut punch to hear that the family name, my family name, was somehow better reflected by a dentist with a mortgage than by someone who just built a company on the verge of changing healthcare forever. After I signed, Victor raised his glass, some neat bourbon in a heavy tumbler, and said, "To being underestimated." And to eating them alive. We laughed, and it wasn't hollow laughter either. It felt real. Like I had finally come up for air after years of being told my life was just a phase I hadn't grown out of yet. The contract zipped itself into an encrypted folder and disappeared from my screen. It was done. Sealed, approved, set in motion. I refreshed my email and watched the first of many press coordination messages hit my inbox like a wave. A short time from now, my name would be printed across tech headlines, LinkedIn would blow up, and my family, the same ones who thought I didn't have a real career, would be left scrambling to pretend they saw it coming all along. I sat back in my chair, took a deep breath, and let myself feel something I hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Not relief. Not even pride. Just power. Silent, calm, solid power. The kind that comes from knowing no one gave it to you, you carved it yourself, with bloody fingers and sleepless nights and enough quiet pain to fill a second life. The press embargo was scheduled to lift in 30 minutes. I stared at the TechCrunch homepage and whispered under my breath, "Let's see who calls first." The moment the embargo lifted, it was like someone had pulled a pin from a grenade and tossed it straight into my inbox. The TechCrunch article hit at exactly 9 a.m. sharp, just like Victor promised, and the headline was louder than anything I could have written myself, bold font and all caps, doing most of the emotional labor I'd carried silently for the past 12 months. Seattle AI startup merges with Novacore in $50 million deal. Claire Morgan to lead innovation division. The kind of headline that makes recruiters salivate. Cousins reappear from nowhere, and childhood classmates pretend we were best friends once during gym class. The kind of headline that gets screen captured by people who've never liked your posts once in 5 years, but suddenly have a lot to say about how proud they've always been. I stared at the screen for a long moment, not reading the article so much as letting the shape of it burn into my chest like a brand I earned. My photo was dead center. Not one of those perfectly lit headshots either. It was a candid from the conference last month, me in a black blazer, and a smirk I didn't remember giving. But there I was, framed between lines of code and paragraphs about impact metrics and scalable healthcare disruption. It read like a success story, and I guess in a lot of ways it was. But it didn't feel like a celebration. Not yet. It felt like standing in the eye of a storm I built myself. And then the buzzing started. My phone lit up like it had been set on fire. First came the LinkedIn notifications, a waterfall of connection requests and congratulations. Comments from people who never replied to my pitch emails back when I was eating oatmeal 3 times a day. Then the texts, old coworkers, random acquaintances, Jesse's cousin from Boulder who said, "This is massive. Proud to know you," like we'd ever actually met. One after another after another. Some were sincere, some were opportunistic, and a few were just plain awkward, like the guy I went on 2 Bumble dates with who texted, "Knew you were gonna be big. Drink sometime?" But the real shock wasn't who did reach out, it was who didn't. The family group chat, which had been so damn lively over the past week, flooded with photos of cranberry sauce, napkin folding tutorials, and Karen's 7 Instagram stories about pie crust lattice work, went stone cold. Nothing. Not a peep. Not even a generic thumbs-up emoji for mom, which she usually threw around like glitter anytime someone posted a photo of a salad or a grandkid with a participation ribbon. It was like the entire group had unplugged itself, the silence echoing louder than any praise I might have imagined. I stared at the empty screen for longer than I'd admit, refreshing out of some stupid reflex like maybe they just hadn't seen it yet. Maybe they were all just too busy digesting their turkey leftovers to process the fact that the family loser had just landed a $50 million deal with a global health tech conglomerate. I told myself I didn't care, and mostly I didn't, but deep down, the silence stung more than I expected. You don't realize how badly you've been starving for someone's approval until it's dangling in the air like smoke you can't grasp. And then, hours later, a single message popped up from my mom. "Oh honey," she wrote, with her usual over-punctuated enthusiasm. "Why didn't you tell us? As if I hadn't spent years trying to tell them who I was. As if they'd been listening with their eyes closed and ears stuffed full of their own definitions of success. The question wasn't why didn't I tell them, the question was, why would I bother? Eric never replied. Not once. Not even a passive-aggressive thumbs up or a nod in my direction. And that silence felt personal in a way that almost made me laugh. He could fill the group chat with dental memes and fantasy football rants, but he couldn't bring himself to acknowledge that the little sister he used to mock for having no real plan had just out-earned his entire private practice in one digital signature. Karen, ever the queen of performative grace, broke her own silence hours later with a meme she probably thought was clever, some stock photo of a baby chick hatching out of an egg next to the words, "Big things come in quiet packages." No caption, no congrats, just that. Like she wanted credit for being supportive without ever actually supporting anything. I didn't respond to any of them. Victor texted soon after, "You okay?" 2 words. No fluff. Just the kind of check-in that meant more than a dozen hollow platitudes. I wrote back, "Never better." Just full of stuffing and irony. He sent back a laughing face and a gif of someone slow clapping, and for the first time all day, I actually let myself laugh out loud. Because yeah, it was ridiculous. All of it. The years I spent biting my tongue at family dinners while Eric talked over me, the way Karen introduced me to her real estate friends like I was between gigs instead of building an empire from a folding chair and a hotspot connection. And then came the kicker. Karen, apparently emboldened by her own meme, sent one more message, this time directly to me. "Hey Claire," it began, "all sugar and plastic charm. We're doing a little post-Thanksgiving brunch this weekend with just close family. Would love for you to swing by." Super casual. Just close family. Like I hadn't been erased from the original holiday like a typo in a recipe card. Like I hadn't already been deemed too flaky or unstable or embarrassing to sit next to their wine-sipping dentist friends in matching plaid scarves. Now that my name was on the front page of TechCrunch, I was apparently just close enough to count again. I stared at the message and let it sit there. I didn't reply. Not right away. I wanted them to wonder. Just like they made me wonder, for years, whether I mattered at all. They wanted me now? Well, maybe they'd get me, but not the version they remembered. Not the one who kept the peace. This time, I'd be bringing something else entirely. I wasn't going to go at first. The thought of showing up at Karen's post-Thanksgiving close family brunch made my skin itch with every memory of being talked over, dismissed, or gently ridiculed in the exact same living room they'd be sipping mimosas in. But then I thought about it again, not as a guest showing up for pie, but as a woman walking into a room full of people who had written her off like a bad investment they were too polite to say out loud. And I decided, some victories deserve a front row seat, even if it means sitting through another one of Eric's slow-burn dentist stories or Karen's forced smile that stretches thinner than the crust on her store-bought quiche. I wore the navy blue suit. The one with clean lines and sharp shoulders, the one that made me look like I could walk straight into Congress and tell them how to fix the internet. I pulled my hair back, not for beauty, but for precision. There's a difference. I wore the heels I never touch unless I need to hear myself walk into a room. And I brought a bottle of champagne, not the $20 grocery store brand, but a true French vintage I had delivered from a boutique distributor who only sells to restaurants with waiting lists. The house looked the same as always, too many seasonal decorations, too much beige, too little air. Karen opened the door with a smile that didn't quite make it to her eyes and let out a tight, chirpy "Claire. So glad you could make it." I handed her the bottle and said, "Congratulations on your interior lighting not being dimmed by my unstable career path," and watched her blink just once before laughing a little too hard. Inside, Eric was already nursing a Bloody Mary and standing near the kitchen island like he was headlining a TED Talk about seasonal spice blends. He greeted me with a nod that carried all the discomfort of a man who's been told he needs to be nice to his exiled sister now that she might actually outrank him. "Hey," he said, flatly. "Saw the article. That's quite a thing." I didn't answer right away. I took off my coat, hung it neatly, and poured myself a mimosa from the pre-mixed pitcher they'd carefully arranged next to name-tagged coffee mugs. "Yeah," I said after a long beat, "it's been a week." I took a slow sip and let the moment settle. The rest of the guests, a cousin with a vegan blog, one of Karen's realtor friends, and their oldest child's piano teacher, all gave me the polite smiles of people unsure whether they were supposed to be impressed, jealous, or simply confused. Eric kept hovering, as if circling an opening he hadn't quite earned yet. "So, this thing of yours," he finally said, voice full of forced casual interest. "It's not just an app, right?" It landed awkwardly, like someone asking if a skyscraper is more than a blueprint. I turned slowly, set my glass down, and smiled without showing my teeth. "Nope," I said evenly. "It's a platform. Behavioral AI with full-scale health integrations. We just turned down Meta, if that helps paint the picture." There was a pause in the room that felt physical, like the air molecules rearranged themselves into a collective choke. Karen, who had been fussing with the silverware for no reason, turned sharply. "You turned them down?" she asked, voice rising like it was personally offensive. "Why?" I shrugged, enjoying the sensation of people finally asking me something with curiosity instead of condescension. "They didn't share our values. Or our math." The brunch kept going, technically, but the energy had shifted. People were suddenly curious, overly polite, laughing too hard at things I said that weren't even jokes. One guest asked me what it felt like to change the world, and another tried to pivot the conversation toward crypto for some reason. I let them talk. I let them climb over themselves with their newly discovered admiration for my formerly disposable little freelance gig. I nodded politely, sipped slowly, and said almost nothing. Let them fill in the blanks with whatever fantasy made them most comfortable. And then, when the moment felt right, not too dramatic, not too soft, I leaned in slightly and said, "We're hiring next quarter." The room collectively inhaled, and I held the silence like a string pulled taut. "But only people with real humility," I added, then took another sip and didn't look back at anyone's reaction. It was nuclear. The kind of silence that rattles plates. I saw Karen freeze, her hand mid-reach toward a dish of fruit salad. Eric looked down, like he had suddenly remembered something urgent on his shoe. No one spoke for several long seconds, and I let the weight of it settle into the very foundation of their picture-perfect brunch. I stayed another 20 minutes, just long enough to leave a memory. I didn't make a scene, didn't brag, didn't raise my voice once. But when I stood up and grabbed my coat, everyone in that room knew the balance had shifted and not in their favor. Karen made a weak attempt at a hug, which I dodged with a smile and a polite, "See you around." I was halfway down the driveway, the sharp November air cutting clean against my face, when I heard the door creak open behind me. "Claire, wait," came my mother's voice, softer than usual, like she was speaking from inside a memory. I turned slowly. She stood there with something in her hands, an envelope, cream-colored and worn at the edges. "It's from your father's will," she said. "There's something you should see." She held it out like it might burn her fingers, like it weighed more than it looked. And I, against my better judgment, reached out and took it. Because some things, even when they come late, still deserve to be opened. The envelope felt strangely heavy for something so small, as if it had been carrying 5 years of weight in silence, tucked away in some forgotten drawer or dusty shoebox, only now being deemed worthy of delivery. My mother didn't say anything more, just pressed it into my hand like it might dissolve if held too long, her fingers brushing mine with a rare tenderness that came more from guilt than comfort. I didn't open it until later, not in the driveway. Not in the car, not even once I got back to the apartment, but hours later, after the noise had settled and the light had drained from the sky. I sat on my couch with a cup of reheated tea and slowly slid my finger beneath the flap. Inside was a single sheet of yellowing paper, folded neatly in thirds, my name written across the top in my father's exact, blocky handwriting, the kind that always looked like he was filling out forms, even when writing birthday cards. The words were short, deliberate, and yet they hit harder than anything I'd heard in years. Claire, I know you'll take the longest road. You always do. But I also know you'll get there, and when you do, they'll pretend they believed in you all along. I must have read it a dozen times in a row, like it would rewrite itself into something softer if I stared long enough. But it didn't. It was sharp, precise. The kind of truth only a man who watched people closely and quietly could write. My father hadn't been one for speeches or pep talks. He rarely offered praise, not because he didn't believe in us, but because he thought belief was something you showed through silence, not sentiment. Still, reading that line now, the acknowledgement of my uphill path, of how no one would remember their doubts once I'd made it, it cracked something wide open in me that had been bolted shut for too long. I cried. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind of cry where one tear escapes and glides perfectly down your cheek. I cried like a kid who'd been waiting years for someone to finally say, "I saw you." Even when no one else did. I cried because he was right, and he wasn't even here to watch it happen. I cried because all the noise from the last week, the silence from Eric, the passive-aggressive memes from Karen, the "we always knew you were special" texts from high school acquaintances, all of it felt like noise trying to drown out what had really happened. They wanted to rewrite history. They wanted to smooth it all out, pretend like the years of subtle dismissal and polite eye rolls never happened. They wanted to rebrand me as the successful sister, the brilliant cousin, the tech genius who always had potential, without ever admitting how many years they spent trying to prune my ambition into something quieter, more palatable, more aligned with the family image. But I wasn't going to let them have that. Not anymore. The next morning, I booked a flight to Lisbon. Not because I needed an escape, but because expansion had always been part of the plan, and I'd been putting it off for too long. I texted Victor a single sentence that carried more intention than any boardroom speech I'd ever given. "Let's take this global." He replied within minutes with a simple, "Already ahead of you." And I believed him. Packing didn't take long. My life was already halfway mobile, and the rest could follow if it needed to. I brought the essentials: laptop, chargers, 2 blazers, 1 swimsuit, the letter. I left behind the rest. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a family-wide announcement. I didn't respond to Karen's latest message, which had arrived that morning like some final test of my resolve. "Hi, Claire. So exciting about your company. Quick question. Would you be open to speaking at our Rotary Women's panel next month? It's just a small event, but would be so inspiring for the younger girls to hear your story." The audacity of it made me laugh. Out loud. Alone. In my kitchen. The very same woman who couldn't find room for me at her holiday table was now curating me as a talking point, an accessory, a photo op for her social media caption, something like "Family means everything." So proud of my sister-in-law. I turned the phone face down without responding, poured myself a second coffee, and watched the clouds shift through the window like they knew something I didn't. By the time I got to Lisbon, the air smelled different, cleaner, salter, filled with something unnameable that made you breathe just a little deeper. I checked into a small flat with a balcony that overlooked the ocean and a coffee shop downstairs that served espresso strong enough to wake God. I didn't unpack everything, just enough to say I live here now for a while. That first evening, I took my espresso out onto the balcony and sat in a woven chair that creaked just enough to remind you it had a past. The sun dropped low, painting the water in shades of fire, and I let the silence stretch out like a well-earned nap after a long, ugly season. My phone buzzed again, twice, maybe 3 times, probably more messages from people who used to forget my birthday but now wanted to pick my brain about AI, equity rounds, and how to get into tech. I didn't check. I didn't care. Eventually, I turned the phone off completely. Powered it down like a light switch, like a door closed without explanation. And in the silence that followed, I let myself taste it, the rare, almost sacred flavor of freedom that comes not from winning, but from knowing you didn't have to explain how you got there to anyone. They fed me doubt for years. I made a feast out of it, and I'm still hungry.